Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Freedom. And today we have a special guest, Liam Madden, who is a Republican running for U.S. House, correct?
I would say I'm an independent who won the Republican primary, and I am running in the general election to be Vermont's representative to Congress.
Welcome, welcome, and thank you for coming. And Jim and I are here today to talk to you. Jim, uh, have you any questions right off the top, or would you like to introduce is it your son there?
Yeah, hey everybody, this is Win. Goes by Winnie a lot. He is my very, very new family member, fresh to the pack, and he's around 4 months old, and he'll be joining us. So thanks for bearing with us.
How many in your family?
There's one Winnie, one June, and my wife Lauren, and me, and then we have a dog and some chickens and some cats.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Jim, would you like to fire some questions, or shall I?
Well, I did have one question. Does the dog protect your chickens?
He's a herding dog, and chickens don't much like to be herded. So we've kind of trained him to just leave them alone as best as we can. But he does when anything threatens the chickens, he has some brotherly instincts and goes to help them out.
Okay. All right. Yes, I wrote an article in 2006, 2008 called Homeland Security equals free-range chickens, Jerusalem artichokes, and a good dog.
Oh, wow. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. All fronts.
It was very funny, and it got republished in several different places. And so I'm always curious how other people manage to keep their chickens alive and safe from predators. And the dog is usually the best all-around defense.
Well, I do pay a yearly bobcat tax. One bobcat will come and take one chicken and then leave us alone for the rest of the year. So
Oh, wow.
it's probably the best kind of predator to have.
I would actually be happy to lose a chicken to a bobcat. But it's the raccoons and the mink that I hate because they kill them all.
Yeah,
and they
don't even eat. They're awful.
Well, I have a raccoon living in the garage, and my approach is to leave out some food every night, so he goes for that, not the other. So down to business. What is your perspective on the electric cars? And I'll try not to paint it with mine.
I am a renewable energy professional. I won MIT's Solve Award for businesses that are focused on business models that are addressing sustainability. And I think electric cars, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. We could have a whole show about electric cars. Where do I even want to start? So the only reason we're really talking about electric cars, why that question would be relevant, is because people feel compelled to go in that direction because of climate change. And I think climate change is a risk, but it is not the type of risk that should compel us to be overwhelmed with fear and to throw all rationality out the window and to suffocate our economy with overzealous regulation, which is also a risk. Ultimately, I do think fossil fuels are a finite resource, and that we need to transition to new sources of energy, and that would entail some electrification of transportation, but more so, I would support public transportation. Electric vehicles also have a really high embodied energy cost. And that embodied energy cost does eventually pay for itself, assuming that the electricity is sourced from, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're quantifying, but assuming that carbon is the metric, they'll eventually pay for themselves if you're sourcing from nuclear or renewables, which most aren't. But in the short term, it actually takes, I don't know, some depends on the car, but like 10 years to pay for itself in terms of the carbon footprint or the energy. So I think that, I'm not like banging my fist in the air screaming for more electric cars. I'm fine if people want to buy them. We obviously need to think about the massive upgrade of the grid that would be entailed, because we can't really support electrification of everything that fossil fuel does without massive upgrades to the grid infrastructure, which I'm fine doing, but we would have to logically and rationally plan for that and not just force people to transition away from fossil fuel vehicles without planning for it. And we shouldn't do so in a way that economically burdens the people who could least afford that transition.
What
So,
about,
I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but
Yep.
I just kind of
Yep.
laid out some of the initial things that come to the top of my head.
Well, just between you and me, I think it's an insane idea to go into electric vehicles as if it's going to save pollution. I think and I wonder what you think about whether part of the greater agenda is the ability from a central location to control the availability of electricity to charge the cars, as we saw in California, where people are told to get electric cars, but not to charge them. So there's an amount of freedom that will be surrendered by going into electric cars. Not to mention, what about the amount of rare earth minerals that go into each car?
Right. Ultimately, yeah, I think a better public transportation system really has to be the way of the future, or take much more of the burden of transportation. Some people might think what you said is really out there about a central authority controlling the access to electricity, but I was just in a customer's house last weekend in Wilmington, and I was looking at their house, helping them design a heat pump system, and they said they don't want a connection to Google Nest thermostats, because they just heard a news story from Colorado where the state government was controlling the temperature in people's houses. Everyone who was connected to Google Nest, which is just wild. So, I mean, that's happening as of right now. Now, like, I think that just lends some credibility to what you just said about the government being able to control access to energy for certain things. And that kind of thinking concerns me. I mean, it's happening right now. Why wouldn't we speculate that it would happen more?
It's happening in Europe. And what about hydrogen?
I'm sorry, I couldn't. What about hydrogen?
Hydrogen cars.
Oh, I don't know a lot about hydrogen, but I do know that hydrogen is the tiniest molecule, and it's very hard to store efficiently, and that kind of needs to get worked out a little bit better. But I guess I'm open-minded about hydrogen. It still takes energy to break apart the bonds of oxygen and water to make just pure hydrogen, and that would entail some other source of energy that is more long lasting at the very least, and easier on the environment. And I would look to, so I'll just get right into it. If I had $100 to invest in our public energy future, I'd probably put $40 to $50 of that into new energy technologies that are on the brink of commercialization, Manhattan Project style research and development, to things that are not really in the Overton window of what people talk about as, it's either renewables or more drill baby drill, or some people who are pretty hip to it, like you, might say hydrogen. But there are other things also on the horizon. MIT has an offshoot startup called Quaise, which is revolutionizing geothermal energy. There's a Harvard MD and MIT electrical engineer named Randy Mills, who I've gotten the privilege to talk to, who has a company called Brilliant Light Power that has been developing a technology based on hydrinos. What the hell is that? It's basically a form of hydrogen that operates at a lower electron orbital and emits light. And it is something he's received $120 million of investment. He's not just some crank in his garage, right? Like, he's a serious scientist doing paradigm shifting work. So I would invest in those paradigm shifts of energy, but it would be foolish to not invest in some of the proven technologies just in case those things take longer to develop. And of the proven technologies, I think thorium-based nuclear energy would probably have to receive like 10 to 20 of my $100. Things that just reduce our energy needs, so we not just use less energy, but also can survive better if energy becomes much more expensive. Things like public transportation, better housing infrastructure, better building infrastructure would probably receive around 30 of my dollars. And then the rest would go to existing renewables. And so that's probably like, the rest is 5 to 10. So that's kind of how I would prioritize what the energy future looks like. So we're talking about, well, what powers hydrogen? What powers the creation of hydrogen fuels? I'd be all for it if we had thorium nuclear or hydrinos or like really revolutionized geothermal. But as of now, it would just, I think it'd be a really big burden on very finite and crude technologies.
But I'd have to look more into thorium nuclear and how it differs from the nuclear power plant that we spent a long time getting shut down.
So some of the I can send you some links from some thorium developments, but some of the top line high level differences between thorium and others, uranium, is that one, the fuel is less dangerous for less long. It's still really long time because uranium takes thousands of years to decay safely, and this is like hundreds of years. Hundreds of years is still a really long time. But if we have 95% less waste, then that has to be it's a downside. It's absolutely a downside. You can't get rid of waste as being one of the drawbacks of nuclear energy. But if we had 90% less of it, it's got to count for something. And if it lasts way less long, then it's got to count for something. Thorium is way more difficult to weaponize, which is why we don't have thorium technology, because that's just not what was developed by the US military establishment for what fuels to use. Thorium is way more abundant. So if we were to power the world off of uranium, we'd probably have like 80 years at existing uses of power throughput, but thorium would be thousands of years. So there's it's safer, it's more abundant, it's more difficult to weaponize, and then the issue about safety is really, doesn't even matter what fuel you use, it's the design of the plants. And instead of the 1950s models, there's ways to basically make it impossible, just through better design of nuclear power plants, make it impossible for there to be meltdowns. You could look up the youngest person to ever achieve nuclear fission. He was like 14 years old when he did it. His name is Taylor Wilson. He has a TED Talk, really fun TED Talk. And he talks a bit about how you could design nuclear power plants to just have, if you like built them into the ground and had just certain levels of, you know, a meltdown started, it would melt some metal that poured water and earth over the entire core. It's just make it impossible for a meltdown to happen. So between a safer fuel source, a more abundant fuel source, and just smarter design, nuclear could be a much more sustainable way to power our civilization.
Okay, I'm gonna give Jim a chance to ask his favorite queries. Thank you, Liam.
I had none lined up. I just wanted to listen, and you did say something most interesting. You said that one of the reasons that thorium had not been pursued is because you can't weaponize it. Or you didn't quite say it that way, but I'm saying it that way, that a product that you cannot weaponize is harder to get the central banks and investors interested in it because they like the collateral advantage of being able to sell it to the military. It's a much safer investment to them. So to come up with something that doesn't do really awful things is not usually a good way to make money. So I'm suggesting that that Wall Street is not as interested in thorium simply because you cannot weaponize it, and
That could
you
be.
don't have to respond to that.
That could be.
Well, there are a lot of things that are precedent setting for that opinion. I mean, I'm not just making that up out of thin air. There are a lot of benefits financially to a company that has that can weaponize whatever it is it's doing. The pharmaceutical industry is a good example where nobody realizes that, you know, most people don't realize that that's part of what big pharma can do, but it indeed is part of what big pharma can do. And so it's very helpful to a company to be able to slaughter people with whatever it is that they happen to be making. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that in there.
Well, you mentioned something that caught my ear, which was public banking, and something that you guys said you share some knowledge about, some passion for, and I'm interested. Tell me what you know. What's exciting to you about public banking? How does it work?
Well, I was I guess you'd call it the chairman of the original group that was interested in public banking. I was the first person to testify in Montpelier on behalf of public banking so many years ago that I can't remember. And I am, or was, as far as I know, I still am, the public banking representative for the state of Vermont. We kind of did everything we could. We were undermined by the treasurer and one of the senators who was a liberal.
Can we just roll back
can we back up and let's talk
what were
about
you hoping to achieve with public banking, and why do you think public banking was
okay
the tool to do it?
Can I give them the low and dirty?
Yeah,
Jim, the quick and dirty.
Well, yes, public banking has been a wonder for the one state that got involved with it. That's North Dakota. They have been in the black financially and successfully ever since they really got it moving. And they first formed a public bank, I believe, in 1919, after the Progressive Populist Party took over. But then they didn't really do anything with it for quite a long time. So anyway, it's in full, it's going full steam ahead now. And there are many advantages to public banking. I'll just mention the first and obvious one to me, which is that it enriches the state. It circulates money back through the state instead of borrowing money from Wall Street and any other entity that you care to think of, um, by basically creating the money within the state and having the insurance industry take part, and the entire banking industry, of course, taking part, and farmers, and having it measured carefully. In other words, the Bank of North Dakota has very strict rules for the use of the money from that bank. And that's another thing that has kept it in the black so successfully. So, but number one, that the people of the state benefit from it because of the money getting plowed back into the state for education, farming, in particular, and other useful, profitable endeavors.
Can I add a couple things to that?
Yep.
For the Public Bank of North Dakota was a response to the Federal Reserve Bank being created in 1913, which of course is not so federal. It's a private banking group or cartel that lends money to the U.S. It makes money and it puts the U.S. in debt, and then we pay it back. So the only state that had the proper response was North Dakota, and it created its own, in essence, mini Federal Reserve. So its taxes go into the bank, and from which it makes its reserves that can guarantee loans through the banks of North Dakota. So, for example, here in Vermont, I think we only have 3 banks left, or Vermont-based banks, but North Dakota has, we've got similar amounts of people, about 600,000, but they have, I think, 95 banks, local banks, because loans are guaranteed. And they're insulated from the greater economy because they have control over their loan policy. The legislature can dictate, they can say what they're loaning for, which in Vermont we're subject to whatever the private banking wishes are that we can do. And I don't know if we've changed, but we've been, as the state of Vermont, we've been a customer of TD Bank North, which is horrendously hypocritical of Vermont because TD Bank North has been the primary investor in tar sands. So there's what would happen is our taxes would go in and we would have more loan capacity, and we'd be recycling our money and creating money for the state of Vermont and sending it back. So it would be more of a closed loop. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
So that's a huge interest is our debt-based money system, because we only get new money by going into debt, and that's what's the cause of so much destruction.
Yeah, but it's still, the Bank of North Dakota is still within the debt-based system. However, when you recycle that interest back into the state, then you don't have to you don't have to become a slave to the Federal Reserve.
Right.
That's right.
Of
And
which there are 8 banks.
We worked together, and we got I ran on that, and I think Jim, you ran on it, and we went to the GovOps committee. We got a lot of people really interested in it, and what we found out was that key chairs, even though a whole committee would be interested in it, a chairperson could block it from moving forward, and or a treasurer, our particular treasurer, would just mouth the intentions of our banking lobbyist, Chris Delia, who represents the bank of the major banks. He's a lobbyist for the bank, and so it was really sideswiped right at those gateway places in the legislature. So that's the
way of the sausage is made, as they say, right?
Yeah. But
well, I became much more enamored of the legislature as a result, because they were very positive about having a study. A study was done through I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, the study was done. Gary Flomanoff was in charge of it, and it showed the benefit to Vermont big time. And I
Also,
think
they did the study, and then the chairs of the committee said, nah.
Well,
the
what
one chair of one committee who refused to pass it on to the last committee. There were three committees: government ops, finance, and appropriations. And I believe it was appropriations or finance refused to pass it on to government
to
appropriate.
appropriations. I thought it
Yeah.
was the GovOps, but because what
No,
happened was is Chris Delia, I mean, and Beth Pierce came in, and she stated that if we got a public bank, that our AAA bond rating would be at risk, which was absolutely untrue. Our AAA bond rating is based on, you know, whether we're paying up to date with our obligations.
Right.
But she scared everybody. And then what they did is they did a sort of a sidestep, and they took like 10% of our, I think it was 300 million or whatever it was that we had, and put it into Vita to put out short-term loans. So Vita could have become a bank and should have gotten a license, but it just stopped short of that. So they just sort of squirreled around.
Yeah, and we were supposed to be thrilled that we had a major victory, which was called 10% for Vermont. That's what the thing was called. And the person who was running Vita, whom I met with and know, her ignorance about banking was jaw-dropping. I mean, she had no idea what banks do, and she said that this was the state bank for Vermont, and it had no resemblance to a bank. It borrowed all the money that it had.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what banks do. Banks don't borrow the money they have. They create money based on loans. And this woman actually thought that Vita was a bank. And so that hurt our efforts, because when she found out what banks actually do, she seemed to get cold feet about the whole idea. The whole idea went right over her head because she didn't realize how beneficial that kind of thing was to the state of Vermont. So
I don't know if you guys caught the most recent debate Vermont Digger did with the congressional candidates, and every candidate was given the opportunity to ask other candidates a question, and my question for Becca Ballant was, how is money created? And
she didn't know that.
She really fumbled through it. And I think, I didn't really have the opportunity to follow up on it, but I think she got it wrong.
Yeah. Well, I see Becca Balint is very dangerous to our freedoms, and I wonder, you know, it's a concern that there's three of you in the race for me. I'm not quite sure what I can do about it. I saw your letter showing a path to winning, and I think you've done some excellent letters. And how do you feel about your prospects? Or
Well, in the primaries, for much of the primaries, I thought my prospects were like 25%. And then a couple weeks before the actual election day, I saw that I was within 1 point of the lead, and I thought I probably have like a 45% chance of winning. So at this stage, with no polling as of yet, although I am working on some internal polling, I think I'm probably at like a 35 to 40% chance right now. I showed you that math of, I think I can get 75% of Republicans. I think I can get the vast number of independents and people who vote both ways, which there's a large amount of in Vermont. And I
Mhm.
think I can get, and if I get around 20% of Democrats, then I can win. I think that's doable. And I think that would come as a shock to a lot of the Vermont politicers and media establishment. So it's really about name recognition, and what's being not working in my favor right now is that Becca Balance is backing out of all of these local debates. She backed out of one in Rutland today. She backed out of one in Manchester yesterday. So she understands that the more people know who I am, the worse it is for her. And so she's just making less and less opportunities for that.
It's so
Um,
cowardly.
it's quite cowardly, yeah.
It's so undemocratic. It's so inappropriate not to be present to for a contrast. It shows just a complete cowardice.
But yeah, I have a path to winning, and I'm interested what happens this next couple of weeks, because I have two statewide Vermont media stories featuring me. One is from Vermont Public Radio, and the other will be from Vermont Digger. So the more statewide attention I can get, I think the more I will be a really serious contender. Well, I'm going to try and grab a charger to help my light stay on.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hmm. Jim, maybe
Facing the same old problems when you're against somebody with massive money behind her campaign and name recognition, just betting on the momentum of name recognition, and it always wins. That's the sick part of being a Vermont. Well, it probably is the same way in every state, but it's certainly true in Vermont. If you look like you are a reasonable moderate person, and you tell the woke people everything they want to hear, and you have name recognition, you're going to win, no matter how god awful a congressperson or whatever it is you're running for. No matter how awful you are, you're going to win if you do those things, and she knows that.
Yeah.
And of course, she got recommended by Sanders, which is enough for me to know. But that's what does it in the state of Vermont.
yeah, it's too bad. People aren't. They rely on other people to make their decisions for them, and uh, it's we really need community meetings in circles to generate the best ideas. And Vermont really limits the how much press you get. How has the press been for you? I've seen some good positive press for you, Liam.
Well, early in the race, I almost dropped out because I thought, wow, I truly believe I have some credibility in this race, and I bring very interesting perspectives. And I was getting absolutely no media attention. I thought I have no chance of winning. Why even bother? The only thing that kept me in was that I had to go and get 500 signatures, and I had to talk to 500 people to do that. And I realized that people were very receptive to what I was saying. And so I was like, oh, screw the media. I think there is a path if I can just connect with people. And I just need to be creative and effective of how to connect with people. But by and large, the media has done the worst thing it could do for me, which is ignore me. I would rather have the controversy, or the big thing is that I am an independent who won the Republican primary, and everyone who's deeply kind of Trump conservative is outraged by that. And then on the other side, everyone who's the mirror image of that on the Democratic side is, I've gotten so many emails and messages saying, I would vote for you, but you have that label Republican. Like I'm in the proximity of Republican, and it's like, it does the label that mean that much to people? It's just insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, have you been talking to a lot of people? I mean, that whole problem of how much hatred is being s- generated by, I think it's the press and propaganda. Are you speaking about how we need to have this tolerance for views? Or is that, are you,
Well, I
you
think
know,
as an independent, you clearly need to be able to express that you share values with both sides. And so, yeah, I think, if you had a circle right here and a light shined on it, over there on the wall behind me, it would look like, there was a circle on the wall. If I turned it and looked at it from another perspective, and it was actually a cylinder, right? And it was from this angle straight on, that light would show that there's a rectangle on the wall. You need to be able to change perspective, to take someone's other person's perspective temporarily, to really even understand that there's
mhm,
a different reality.
mhm,
The cylinder existed all along, never the rectangle or the circle. So it's not even about just like tolerating other people so that we can get along and not be at each other's throat. To me, it's like you can't solve problems well. You have a completely distorted view of reality if you don't at least change the perspective to truly see it from someone else's viewpoint. And
mhm.
um, you mentioned something earlier I wanted to touch on, the circles, community circles. I love that idea. I love the idea of like not really even forming a path forward until you've seen it from
Yeah,
multiple, around the circle,
yeah,
from every degree of it,
yeah,
and to be able to do that in a community instead of doing it in this isolated, I'm behind a screen in my echo chamber of whatever
right.
media confirms my biases. I love that idea. Can
Yeah.
you talk a
Well,
bit more about
I've
it?
run, I've run for governor numbers of time. Never as the third time I had some momentum, but I was completely blocked. So I saw how it was rigged. But I think it was maybe the third time. So I've run like 5 times,
Wow.
and just on point policies to educate people about point policies. But one of those runs was, each one was different. Has a different flavor to it. And one of them, around the state, different organizations were having these circles, and they'd be like, 30, 40, or 50 people sitting around, and there'd be some principals of a nonprofit, and there'd be these different candidates that would show up. And it was really excellent because uh, people were brainstorming, and you could instantly see the leadership within the circle, whether they were candidates or not, by how they handled things, how they thought, and it was a really productive way for the community to develop the goals and to be in contact and be participants of the process. So yeah, I enjoyed that run in particular.
I remember that I never ran in order to win. I always ran in order to bring up certain important points that no one else had the guts to touch upon, even though they were crucial to our democracy. 9/11 truth was one of them. Independence for Vermont was another one. Nobody in the race would touch either of those. And
That's
then
right.
the last time I ran on opening up the state. I when I was in debates and when I was given the opportunity to speak, I said I believe that the protocols are bogus and unfair, stupid. And of course, it turned out that I was right, but it didn't matter because the entire, most of the population in the state of Vermont was in such lockstep with the governor's protocols, Republicans and Democrats, that somebody calling to open up the state and end the lockdowns and take off the masks was a voice in the wilderness. And
Well,
now that's what
yeah,
we
but
have.
Jim, in 2020 they shut down. They, used to be able to write letters, used to be able to comment, put
Yeah,
comments.
yeah.
That you used to be able to write in front porch forum. They shut down every single
They did.
every single opening that
Yep.
conversations could have. So they just silenced the dissent and the
Yep.
also the science. So
Yeah.
it was very
That was why that's why it was so good that I got to run, because when they had to let me into a debate, they couldn't shut me up when I said stuff like that, and it made perfect sense. And had I had a voice that was covered by the media, would have been a different story.
mhm.
Yeah, I would say the response to COVID was a very important motivator for me running as well. I was pretty appalled, and I noticed that too, Emily, that it was no use to write a letter to the editor to any of Vermont's newspapers because their policy was whatever the government tells us is the truth, which is just shocking to me.
Yeah, and then Front Porch Forum admitted that they were almost proud of it. That if it's against the recommendations of the CDC, you are not allowed a voice on Front Porch Forum. Even if you were having a meeting or whatever.
Yeah, I got shut out.
You were. Yeah.
And as you're saying now, it's like now all of those policies have been walked back. To be fair, also the disease has mutated to be way, way safer. But it's also true that the CDC director just said she got her 5th booster shot today or yesterday. Like it turned out that we wackadoos that were saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't mandate this brand new technology that's been studied for 8 weeks. If we had known that it would take 5 shots in a year, that's not a vaccine. A vaccine does not take 5 shots in a year to keep you safe.
And it's not effective. It's not effective. And this new shot, what they've studied on 8 mice? On 8 mice is the study. That's it. And they've gone ahead. I think, I don't know whether it's an emergency approval, but it's so insidious and it's such a trespass.
Well, I mean, even if it's not an emergency approval, the lead vaccine safety officials in the FDA resigned this year. They resigned in protest because they couldn't attach their names to the science being done.
Yeah, it's been a huge crime as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think we have seen the awakening of the people to exactly what's been done to them yet. And when we do, it's going to be a very interesting clash between the public and their, the betrayal of trust.
Well, that's the point I was trying to get to for when you said, Jim, that of course you're right now, but no one will ever care. It's like no one's ever going to make fanfare that they were wrong about this, and most of them will actually just say that they were on the opposite side all along. As we look back on the Iraq War, and now that it's popular to say it was a travesty, and it was based on lies. You have people like Donald Trump, for instance, say, "Oh yeah, it was a travesty. I was against it all along." Well, like, he wasn't. People have very selective memories. They always think they were on the right side, but it's very few people that were, really doing the burden of shining that light of sanity throughout when it was hard to do so.
Yeah. And that's when I left being a Democrat, really, was that Democrats wouldn't go there. And I was really shocked at how my fellow peace activists wouldn't go into the inappropriateness. Into the what?
They wouldn't look at the facts. The peace activists wouldn't look into the facts about Ukraine either, and they're peace activists. It's just it's mass formation, and I just I just wrote a review of the book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism.
Did you like
So
it?
I liked the book, and hopefully you'll read my review of it. It's posted at Guy Page's publication, the Daily Chronicle, and it's
I will.
posted,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I can get your email from Emily, and I can send you the link to either the Vermont Independent, where it's posted with an interview of Matthias Desmet, or I can send you the link to the Vermont Chronicle.
Hmm.
I think you'd
Excellent. Please.
appreciate the.
So I take it you must know Rob Williams, both of you.
Oh, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, what is your we were wrapping up it right now, Liam. Do you want to let me give you the opportunity to bring up the last topic and close out the show?
Well, I think that has to be this health of our political system, and that's the real reason I'm running. Like, there's lots of other factors, contributing factors. It definitely wasn't COVID alone. It definitely wasn't my experience in the Iraq War, or what's happening in the environment. The overarching factor to me is a complete lack of confidence in our political system's ability to solve large, complex, scary problems. And they all come down to whether it's whatever's really important to people, whether it's inflation or the way big tech is expanding and choking out all of the dissent in our public discourse, or good old-fashioned war. It really all comes down to this age-old problem of humans growing their power, and often that's through the growth of technological power, in a way that outpaces our growth of wisdom and compassion. And I see our politics as this perfect embodiment of that problem, where we have like Donald Trump and Joe Biden as the options to be the most powerful people in the world. That is not an indication of a really sick system. And we all know it's a disgrace to our potential. And I think of people like Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison as, why can't we have the kind of society where we make that a normal trait among our children, that kind of curiosity and ingenuity, or the moral courage and clarity of Martin Luther King or Frederick Douglass, or the resilience of a Helen Keller. This is our potential, right? And where we are is squabbling about these tribal propaganda wars. And I have a complete lack of faith in this two-party system to actually fulfill our potential, to actually solve our problems well, to actually represent us, to do anything other than drive us apart and give the commonwealth to oligarchs. And so the name of my campaign, the title of my website, is not Liam Madden for Congress. It is Rebirth Democracy. And it really is centered around the idea of how can we, I'm not saying burn down the institutions or crumple up the Constitution. It's like build upon the Constitution to find ways to bypass politicians who are stuck in gridlock, who are corrupt, who aren't listening, and to not just give people more power, although definitely give people more power, because as Thomas Jefferson said, there is no safe depository for the ultimate power of society other than the people themselves, right? So if we're stuck in this system that isn't correcting itself, then we have to come back to the people to give them the opportunity to correct it. And Thomas Jefferson also says that the rest of that quote is, and if we deem them not enlightened enough to wield this power wisely, then the remedy is not to take the power from them. It is to help them be wise. So I'm not saying we just need to give people more power and have mob rule. I'm saying the technology exists, the innovations are possible to the processes themselves to make sure that people can act from, as you said, going around the circle and gathering and harnessing the best ideas and refining them so that they're not just pitting 51% against 49%, that they actually synthesize our values. This is possible. Technology really helps it because it helps the speed of communication, and it can actually filter up great ideas that span the ideological spectrum, just like our current information technologies filter up the most polarizing garbage ideas in social media. The same technology can be pointed in the opposite direction. And this could be what helps technology, or what helps free, open societies have the upper hand in the 21st century, because this technology will be used either by authoritarian, totalitarian governments overseas that are unaccountable to the people, or it will be used by unaccountable technology companies and oligarchs here at home. So the only future that is actually free and open and democratic is if we can find a way to use that same kind of information sharing and kind of values synthesizing, that kind of bringing the best from us technology that does exist, and putting that in service to humanity and this planet. So I think that's the issue I'm running on, is rebirthing democracy and ensuring that we're not just changing the face in Washington over and over and over. That's the definition of sanity, but we're changing the rules of the game. And that's what I want to help us do as Vermont's representative in Congress.
Boy, you would love my review of Matthias Desmond's book, because
I have a feeling I will. Yeah.
I talk about the quelching and the squandering of our creativity through mass formation and totalitarianism, and that with that birth, with that rebirth of democracy, people have more fulfilling lives instead of dumbed down. So thank you for that beautiful speech, by the way.
Yes.
I thought that was wonderful what you said.
Yes, thank you. We're resonating at the same place, Liam, and maybe beyond this run, we can talk again. I've given up politics, and I'm looking to get to these principles through an economic doorway. So maybe we can talk about what that looks like. But thank you for voicing such an important transition so well and leading us there.
Oh, we're going to see more of each other for sure. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. Great to meet you too, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. Okay.